Now, Doc, you've been reading comic books pretty much your entire life, and you've seen, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows. It's very cyclical. There's an up period, there's a down period. Sometimes you're in maybe just a transition period, which is really what I think we're in now. But it does feel like there are bad actors out there that are trying to get a hold of these characters, these universes, and fundamentally alter them, perhaps to kill the industry. I don't think it's quite that nefarious, but it does feel like they are trying to drive people away.
That's pretty obvious. They actively say we want to get rid of this XYZ, I guess, portion of the customer base, and then refer to everyone that disagrees with a lot of the radical changes being made as meeting the criteria to be XYZ fan group. The whole point is to drive others away, which the end goal of which could only be the death of the medium. I mean, when there's nobody buying it, it can't continue to survive, right?
Well, yeah, but there's also, it almost feels like it's sanctioned at some point, because you definitely have the editorial staffs are the ones hiring these creators. The publishers do have social media policies going that are in place that they don't enforce. So it almost feels like what these creators and a lot of the bad actors are doing is fully sanctioned by the industry itself. When I say the industry, I'm talking about the bigger publishers, DC and Marvel. And as a fan, as a reader, and as someone who's covering the comic book industry essentially every day for several years now, it can get very disheartening. It's like, what is going on here? Why doesn't anyone care about this the way that I do? Because I feel like these characters and these universes and this wonderful community that we have and this great 80-year history needs to be preserved and protected, not gatekept so much, but to be appreciated, all the wonderful things that we do have, rather than just destroy everything whole cloth in the name of progress or in the name of social justice or in the name of more representation, whatever it is that the reason that's coming in here, because it always sounds good, that they use to justify the destruction.
Well, yeah. In a lot of cases, it comes from a place of the people in charge believing that everything old is bad and only things that are new are good. So as a result, fundamentally, they dislike the heritage of the characters that they are ostensibly the stewards of, from a corporate and editorial aspect. Additionally, look, you're in an era where these corporations that own these, long-standing, well-known, culturally impactful IPs, they are in a post-sales world where they don't believe that actually selling things matters. They are too big to fail. And I mean,
or they're too small to that if they do fail, no one's going to notice because they're part of Disney and Warner, yes. Warner Brothers, and soon to be Discovery Warner.
Yes, exactly. So these are small aspects. These are small, relatively small, I guess, little corners of multinational, like global corporations that are too big to fail. They are the insignificant portions, so they don't get actually any real attention paid to them by the highest of the high levels. So they're insignificant, but in that way. But they are also part of a corporation too big to fail that won't just get rid of them because they're big enough to be noticed.
And what I'm noticing about this, and I'm sure that if I'm seeing it, I'm sure the creators that are kind of pushing for this and the editors and maybe even executives that are kind of behind this this idea that it's time to get a better audience or to push for things that are push for comics to represent things that they haven't in the past, that it's not working. No. If people get fed up with the modern DC comics and they're a DC fanboy, they'll just go to old DC comics. Correct. Or if you're a modern Marvel, or if you're a Marvel fan, the modern Marvel sucks, but you kind of like DC, you just go over there. You will find your alternative. And I think between the readers themselves, who are quite resilient, who have been through many ups and downs. We almost lost Marvel at one time. We almost lost DC at one time. Hell, it felt like we were going to lose the entire industry at one time. And a lot of The readers that are here that are diehards have been through all of it, and certainly the retailers themselves have turned out to be exceptionally resilient. Like, it doesn't even feel like the pandemic really did all that much to dissuade retailers. They just figured out a better way to do business. They readjusted the way that they were doing because they have to be flexible. Like, at this point, I don't think comic books can be killed.
Well, no, they really can't. First of all, as an art form, it's absurd to think you can kill an entire art form. A medium.
Well, it's not an art form. We're talking about an industry.
Yeah, no.
The North American comic industry. Well, as an art form, as long as you have a pen, a paper, you can be doing comic books.
Yeah. And now you can have change in it. You can have it being infinitesimally smaller than it even currently is. But look, there was a period where like Dell and Gold Key mattered. Dell Comics and Gold Key Comics. And then they became ultra important again in the early like shooter era Valiant world. But they're gone. Charlton Comics, that for a long time really mattered and were bigger than DC and Marvel, they're gone. They're absorbed into DC. Marvel get as a corporate as its own company got absorbed into Disney. DC has been absorbed into Warner Brothers for 40 years now, actually like 45 years now. So look, they're not going anywhere. You can't kill it. There's always going to be at least some small portion. Now, would we maybe not getting brand new comic books with new stories about the characters that are well known and loved? Yeah, possibly, but it's only going to be for a short period of time. The comic industry isn't going anywhere because even if literally nobody buys a brand new Marvel or DC comic that came out next week, nobody bought it, no shops bought it, and they decided, yep, we're done printing new comics. You know what they're going to do? They're going to be reprinting old comics. They're going to be remixing old comics. They're going to be telling stories. Maybe they find a way to do crossovers. They license their characters out to somebody else. There's going to be a way that these characters persist beyond the here and now, no matter how much it tries to, because see, I don't even really think that it's killing the comic industry. I think it's really bad attempts at unaliving themselves. They're like that person that can't quite unalive themselves, that is really bad at it.
All right, well, I'm just going to ignore that analogy. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But one of the interesting things, obviously, if DC and Marvel, drive fans away, from their current product, there's so many alternatives for them now. You can go to the back issue bins, which of course have always been there. Manga has picked up and essentially is driving all the growth, or a vast majority of the growth, within North American comic books. So you've got superhero genres in there, and you have a ton of genres, to be completely honest, in manga that you can go to as an alternative.
Yeah, crowdfunding.
You can go obviously to the indie scene, which is there. There's not a lot of superhero stuff there, but that's certainly there. And then, if creators have gotten fed up with the industry itself, maybe they don't think the industry is doing the right thing, there's never been a better time for them to connect with their audience and just do their own thing. Brian Pulido obviously had his own, comic book company that was publishing, periodic comic books. He's just moved over to a Kickstarter model, and he's kicking ass and taking names with Coffin Comics. There are ways to do things that you don't have to go through the mainstream system anymore. You don't have to be associated with Batman to be noticed anymore. And we've seen the other options opening up with Substack, which seems to be more geared towards writers. But there are so many options out there, and I think these are only going to expand. We see Webtoons are doing phenomenal business now. We've seen our good friends Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini have a Webtoon out. DC has a Webtoon out. There are Webtoon comic books that have been, sold as graphic novels. They end up doing millions upon millions of dollars because they get these enormous audiences for them.
Yes. I mean, look, I think we are not in a dying industry. We are in a significantly transitioning industry. There's going to be over the next, it started about 5 years ago. Um, and it's probably got another 10. I can't predict how much longer it's got, but you're going to have a lot of upheaval in the whole structure of the comic industry. The one that we grew up on, that Marvel, DC, and then Image, and then maybe some other fourth superhero world, and then a bunch of indie stuff. I think that's gone, and I think that's gonna be gone. That structure, but we're gonna end up building a new structure in place of it. I don't know what it's going to look like yet. It could be really great. It could be epically terrible from my perspective on what I want out of the comic industry. But it's in a very, very transitory period. So it's not being killed. It's being changed. It's being fundamentally changed. And
Customers are being forced to choose.
Yeah.
Do you want to continue down this path that you've gotten fed up with in a lot of cases? And if you are fed up, what are you going to do about it? Some of them have left, but I think most of them are just finding healthy alternatives that are out there that is only growing those. And I think that's one of the funnier things about this is that, you have Marvel and DC and these creators that are trying to use them as a vehicle to drive people away. And really, they're just driving people and their money to all these other people that they don't like. they're propping them up by being, unprofessional douchebags.
Well, yeah, and what you're going to do is look, the Marvel and DC, the old structure and its actual like active contempt for the current audience is what started the point of transition, of transformation, and it's where it's going to determine what the end result, the end product of the reimagination of the comic industry structure is going to look like. I mean, it's amusingly self-fulfilling. It's incredibly ironic that the people that hated the existing audience are the ones that are causing their own dominance in the market to be undercut, eliminated, and some new structure for how the, I guess, power, tiers of importance and power and whatever within the comic industry end up settling out. When the dust clears, I think that they can only be able to blame themselves, Marvel and DC, and the creators that worked for Marvel and DC, the editorial that worked for Marvel and DC that pushed such an audience away, are only responsible. They are ultimately responsible for making themselves no longer be in the position to matter that they're pushing people away in the future.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it feels like a lot of people decided this is the hill I'm taking, or this is the hill I'm dying on. Well, ain't nobody dying. It's just going to be a worthless hill. All the gold's going to be gone because the customers are the gold. The customers are the lifeblood, that fuel the creativity and the characters and whatnot. Without the customers, there is no shared comic universe. Without the customers, Batman isn't important. At least with the comic books, I don't think Batman ever goes away like on the big screen. And certainly Warner Brothers, or I guess it's going to be Warner
Disney
Discovery. That merger that can happen, Batman's going to be an important character for them because there's going to be money as they continuously reboot the character in other mediums. But you're right. There's, eventually, if they don't make enough money, you just don't make any more Batman comics. You can sell the 80 years worth of Batman, and he's always been in 2 comic books for pretty much the whole time. So there's an enormous amount of information out there that you could just reprint. You already paid for, and people are still going to buy it up because the stories are timeless. That's one of the real strengths of comic books. I talked about it in my 5 things that comic books do better than any other storytelling medium is the evergreen nature of the settings and the characters. And that's one of the strong points. It's really going to serve them in the future is you probably don't need new stories eventually. The art was good enough. It stands the test of time. And the stories are always so good that you could probably just continuously make money on stuff you already paid for.
Yeah. I mean, they will essentially, they don't realize that their own history is the thing that can be part of their undoing. I mean, yeah, the publishers even themselves, they'll still exist. DC will still be printing Batman, but you know, all the creators that work their hardest to push away the longtime toxic Batman fans for a new, wonderful, younger, progressive Batman audience, and that they don't get it and cause Batman to get canceled. Well, DC will still make money selling old Batman. They just won't make it, but the creators won't make any money writing new Batman.
It's one of the interesting things about the comic book industry is they're basically competing with themselves, as in the past 80 years of history and all these wonderful creators. You know, have fun being the Batman writer and competing with Chuck Dixon and all the wonderful creators that have done Batman in the past, you know, like Alan Moore. You know, you're competing with Frank Miller. And if you aren't bringing good enough stories, they don't have to be better. They just have to be good enough to stand out as worth somebody's time. But once it's no longer worth your time, hey, there's 4 different editions of The Dark Knight Returns, and I've only got 2 of them.
Yep.
I got more money, right? I love that story.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different versions of Uncanny X-Men from about 94 to about 200 in different ways that they've been published, from the singles, the facsimile editions, the reprints, the omnibuses, the trades. I can go buy all of them and ignore modern. I can just ignore that. Or I could say, hey, you know what? I never read John Byrne's Alpha Flight, so I'm going to go read that.
Man, you need to read Claremont's Fantastic Four is what you need to do.
Actually, I do. It's sitting in my to-read pile.
But the good news, obviously, is what we're saying here, Doc, is yes, it does appear that there are bad agents, or it could just be complete gross mismanagement. Hey, it could be gross negligence. You just have dumbasses that are running these things. They're making poor decisions that are driving people out. But comic books aren't dying. The comic book community isn't dying. The passion for comic books aren't dying. If anything, it's actually growing because of Dav Pilkey and Raina Telgemeier and a lot of the other creators that are creating these gateways into comics. Now, does that lead directly into DC and Marvel? I don't think so. But it does lead into a love of comic books and really a growth and appreciation of the medium. You know, DC and Marvel don't have to continue to produce comics for comic books to exist or for us to love comic books, because DC and Marvel's, like, their history and their portfolio is so long. And there's been so many good things in the past that nobody's ever read all of them. Like, there's always going to be something new for you to discover. And with all these emerging options and these emerging ways to connect with customers, it's only getting bigger and better. That's the best thing about being a comic book fan right now. It might feel, hopeless when you look at DC and Marvel, but when you look at the world of possibility and you open up your vision to all the things that are actually out there, it's actually very, very promising right now. And it's like a golden age to be a comic book fan, because there are no restrictions anymore. You aren't restricted by there are only so many publishers out there. You or I could make a comic book tomorrow and we could talk about it, and some people would actually buy it.
Yeah. And I think they'd be idiots if they bought it, but but yeah, like there has never been a better time to create comics. Now, have a lot of the ideas been used up already? Yeah, absolutely. So you gotta think way outside the box. But look, anybody that says the comic industry is dying, I think there's 2 ways we need to look at it. One is, do they mean it's like dying? In which case, I think we can all say that is demonstrably false. But when other people, when they say that it's dying, what they mean is it's dying in its current format, current structure, current how it's all put together. And that, I'd say, is absolutely true. It is dying in that, like, its current, the version 3.0 or 4.0 of comic industry that we're in right now, that is dying, but we are going to get version 5.0.
And it's up to DC and Marvel to keep up with the Joneses, or you get left behind. Earlier in this video, I talked about 5 things that I think comic books do better than any other storytelling medium in the entire world. If you haven't seen that video, and some of the examples that I have of what comic books do just better than everybody, and why comic books cannot be killed, ties into what we just talked about. Definitely check this video out. It's like my love story to comic books right here.